So I'm about to give you a very simple, corny, really, but brutally and ruthlessly powerful and effective formula for dramatically transforming your life in record time. And it's this idea or formula or rule of eliminate all sevens. So here's what it means. In society, we are all used to the idea of rating people on a hot or not hot scale of, 1 to 10, right? And this whole idea for me started when I decided that I was going to eliminate spending time with women who I thought were sevens or less, subjectively for my personal preference and taste. Another way of saying it is choosing quality over quantity. But this rule of sevens makes it a lot more visceral, understandable, and practically applicable than saying some, super high level $10 PhD words like quality over quantity. So for me, the rule became if I thought a girl, in terms of her attractiveness, for me subjectively, was a 7, she was automatically a 6. And the rule that I started playing in my life was you always say no to anything that's a 6 or less, because a 7 is automatically a 6. And you say yes to 8s and higher. Now, what I did was I took this idea, all right, and I read about it somewhere too. This is what started it. Is I read about it somewhere years ago, but I cannot remember where. It was like almost like a side note in some book or something like that. But what I did was I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start applying this rule of no sevens to everything. Meaning, the hangout that I'm being invited to with these people or these friends, how does it feel for me? Does it feel like a 7 energy, an obvious 6 or less, or like an 8, 9, where it's really I'm gonna be fulfilled from it. My soul and heart and mind are gonna be nourished from it. I'm gonna feel good about, right? Like just all those things. Like, is it gonna be a really positive experience? Is it going to be an elevatory, an elevating experience, or is it going to be a deflationary experience that deflates me or brings me down? And so what I started doing was saying, and again, I apply the same thing. If it felt like a 7, it was automatically a 6. And so what happens is, by eliminating all 7s and forcing all 7s to automatically be a 6, it becomes much easier for you to draw a line of distinction between what is a fuck yes and what is a nah, pass. Okay? So again, you can apply this to all areas of your life. And the two ways that I've given you examples of is applying it to the cliche, is someone hot or not? I've given you a much more subtle way of applying it in life in general, which is to just hanging out opportunities, people in your life. When you're around them, and if you were to sit back and think about all the times you hang out with them, spend time with them, interact with them, does it feel like an 8 or a 7 or a 6? And if it's a 6, it should be a no moving forward. If it's a 7, it's automatically a 6, so it should be eliminated moving forward. If it's an 8, keep them. This is how you start to eliminate people out of your life or pull energy back from people who are not bringing good things to your life. That's not to say that that person in and of themselves isn't objectively a good person. It's just that their energy, their vibe, whatever, doesn't align with putting you at an energy vibration of 8 or higher. You with me? A much more subtle subtle way to apply this is now also to get clear on where you want to go in life, in all areas of your life. So for most of us as men, it's the cliche body, babe, the bag, the body, the babe, the Bugatti, as I like to say, right? It's basically our physique and health, our finances and money and resources, our relationship. I'm heterosexual, so I'm going to say woman. right? And then just toys and fun things that we want to have and experiences. Get clear on what you want, and then as you're about to make a choice in action or decision today, right now in this moment, you can pause and ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, 8 being this is a great decision that is aligned with moving me closer to accomplishing the goal or the vision that I have for this area of my life. A 7 being like, it could maybe kind of be good, but it's also probably not. And 6 is like a no. Again, if it's a 7, it's a 6, so it's an automatic no. You with me? So you can very quickly self-coach and really align your daily habits, structure, and decisions with, is this an 8 or higher, with being aligned to moving me closer to my goal, my vision, the things I want. And if it's a 7 where it's like, I could be good, there are some good things to it, but it's not quite 100% bang on, stop. It's a 6. Stop it and eliminate it. See, what happens is that if you really think about your life, and I fall into this repeatedly, and I have to remind myself of this rule of no 7s, we have so much mediocrity in our lives. Like things that are, like it's not the best thing in the world that we want to experience, but it's like not the worst thing. And so we just kind of go with the flow, right? And this brings us to a point I want to share with you, an insight I want to share with you, that I personally, in my experience and in my experience with working with men and coaching men, this is one of the hardest things about personal development, self-help, but really just getting after your goals and creating the life that you really want. And that is this. It is how much you are going to have to say no to things, and how often you're going to have to say no to things if you stand any chance of ever being able to accomplish, realize, manifest, etc., the things that you say are your goals, your dreams, and your desires. Accepting and saying yes to mediocre things that vibrate at a 7 is really just you accepting something that's kind of sort of what you want, but not quite what you want. And we do this in every area of our life, and it just starts to depress us, deflate us, and bring us down and get us just all wrapped up in the weeds, the barnacles, and the thorns of a whole bunch of bullshit that frankly we don't really want. And one of the main reason why it's so hard, I think, to say no so often to so many things, especially in the beginning, because that's when you're going to have to say no the most, because that's when you're making the most amount of changes in terms of contrast, is you're going to have to say no to things that you might actually on some level truly enjoy or like. And the amount of emotional pain that can create and bring, there's no other way to say it, it's fucking rough. Like real talk. No mamby-pamby horse shit, no toxic positivity. It's tough. For example, you're dating somebody, you've been with them for a year or 2 or whatever, and you generally love, and I'm just going to talk about this as a heterosexual man to make it easier for me to communicate it, but you can, apply it to your own reality. If I'm dating a woman for a year, 2 years, and I generally love her, but I can see now, if I'm honest with myself, that this relationship is a 7, which automatically makes it a 6 or less, compared to the vision and the ideal of what I have for what I want in a relationship, what I want in a girlfriend and a future wife. I only have 2 choices if I'm to ever get to my dream, desire, vision, or goal. It's to be able to learn how to communicate, and then communicate very bluntly and directly with my girlfriend, right? And have her agree from her perspective that that's something she's willing to work towards and be collaborative on, and that my vision aligns with what she wants in her life, so that she's a co-participant in getting there, right? I either have to do that or I have to say no to the relationship, breaking up. Breaking up is not fun. It's painful, right? Do you see what I'm saying? But there's a direct correlation between the amount of sevens, there's a direct correlation between the amount of things that vibrate as a 7 in your life that you're saying yes to, that are then keeping you all just full and bottled up and jammed up and hampered down under the weight of those things and the frustration of those things, that's keeping you from getting to an 8, 9, and 10 in your life, right? There's pain in looking at a set of friends, or maybe you have a habit of hanging out with certain friends 2-3 times a week in the activities you do, and you realize that this is a 7 in terms of moving you closer to your goal, because you really, maybe let's say you have a day job and then you got a side hustle, and you got to move that side hustle along to create the financial freedom you need to hit the escape velocity. You need to be able to quit the job to go full time. Again, just a simple cliche example from an entrepreneurial perspective, but you have to look at that and say, man, hanging out with these people, they're great people, but it's a 7. The activity of itself is a 7, so it's automatically a 6. I got to stop. There's pain in tearing yourself away from the fun, the validation, the comfort, the acceptance, the belonging that you experience in being able to regularly hang out and have that, that fun with your friends. It hurts. It's fucking painful in the mind, in the heart, and sometimes both, and you experience it in your body. That's just real talk, right? Maybe you got to change up your habits. Maybe you just always go to the same coffee shops or cafes, but when you go there, you end up procrastinating or socializing, and you're not really being focused the way you say you're going to be. So it becomes a 7, which is automatically a 6, and the rule is no 7s, they're 6s, 8s only. So you got to change up your whole routine and schedule and structure so that you actually stay dialed in. That's hard. That's painful at first. The comfort, the familiarity, the dopamine, endorphins you get from going to the same cool places that you enjoy, right? Seeing the same people, belonging to a community. The list goes on and on and on. And so again, this rule of 7s or no 7s brings us face to face with 2 things. One is that this is the simplest and yet fastest way I've ever found for how anybody can align as many areas of their life as quickly as possible with moving closer to your dreams, desires, and goals. And you can self-coach you can self-coach using this, because you can look at any type of event, experience, habit, person in your life and ask yourself, if I'm being honest with myself, is this a 7, a 6, or an 8? And if it's a 7, again, it's a 6, so it's an automatic no. And if you just start eliminating all 7s from your life, 7s or less from your life, what are you left with? 8s and higher, quality over quantity. Now you're going to start to elevate. This is the fastest formula I've ever seen that anybody can apply in self-coach, because you can literally create the most radical transformation in terms of how you're showing up day to day, your habits, your structures, your decisions in 24 to 72 hours. I mean, you can just have a whole new life. This brings me to point number 2, but the emotional chaos and violence it's going to automatically throw you into is like being in a race car and slamming into a wall at 150 miles an hour. It's going to create so much cognitive dissonance and emotional dissonance at first, because there's so much change, right? And the human mind is wired to actually not want change because stability, consistency is safe. You with me? So it brings you face to face with this formula. If you start applying it, brings you face to face with the hardest part of getting after your goals, elevating your life, creating dramatic, big breakthroughs and transformations, is the reality that I feel like no people really ever talk about too often, is the reality of how often you're going to have to say no. And then the emotional pain you're going to have to go through as you go through that transformation of making those decisions and eliminating the 7s. Because let's face it, those 7s have a lot of comfort in them. There is pleasure in them. There's dopamine in there. There's endorphins in there, right? There's oxytocin in there. There's all the chemical cocktails we need. There's cortisol in there, which is addictive too. So again, this rule of eliminate all sevens. You can do an analysis of your own life and find yourself a whole long list of things that are, because the sixes are easy to identify and it's easy to say no to a six or less. It's the sevens, it's the mediocre things that are just kind of good enough, but nowhere near what we want. That's where so much of our lives are at, especially as men, in this mediocrity, right? And when I look at men who are my age, mid 30s, and men who are in their older too, like in their 40s and 50s. And if I get to have a heart-to-heart true conversation with them and they start sharing about just the deep frustration and anger that they might be in, or depression they might be in, or the regret they're in, when I get the backstory, when I get all the nuances, almost every single time I can tie it back to a man who progressively kept accepting and saying yes to things that had a 7 energy to it in his life. And he just didn't want to lose out on what little he had. So he said yes to it, right? And another way of saying that is so many of us play to not lose. So we accept the what little we have and then pay a very high tax of frustration and dissatisfaction with the bullshit that comes with 7 energy things that has a little bit of what we want, a taste of what we want, but not quite the full deal. And we do that because we're playing to not lose instead of playing to win, which means you're automatically going to have to eliminate and therefore lose all things that are 7 or less. And so you will, by default, for some time period, initially lose out on the good things that came with the mediocre 7 energy stuff. But until you eliminate it, you can't create the space, the clarity, the focus, the energy, the vibe, the congruence you need to lock in and secure things that are 8s, 9s, and 10s for your life. That's it. Tell me what you think. Comment, share with the comments below, and let me know what you think. And let me know if you have any questions about this that I can make other videos about, all right? But the rule is evaluate and analyze your life. Anything that's a 7 is automatically a 6, so you can create a gap of deep distinction much easier and faster. And then anything that's a 7, therefore a 6, is an automatic no. And then everything that's an 8 or higher is a yes. Apply that to all areas of your life, externally and internally. Stick with it. Ride the bull, the bucking bull, the rodeo of what your emotions are going to go through initially from the cognitive dissonance of losing out on the few things that you like, in order to make room for being in the winner's circle of locking in and securing the 8s, 9s, and 10s that you're dreaming of.